Okay, in this video we're going to take a look at another control, and we're going to take a look at the list box and the combo box, and both of these controls work in a very similar way. So the first thing we're going to do is drag the list box, and we're just going to drop that onto the form here and just make that a little bit bigger. Now what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at how we can populate this list with various different items, and there are several ways we can do this. The first way you could put items within your list box would be to click on it, open your properties window, and to scroll to where we said items, and we've got these ellipses at the end here, and if we click on them we're able to add items. So I'm just going to add A, B and C to that list, and you can see that very simply those items get put into that list. So that works very, very simply. You might also want to put some values in, and you might want to do this within the code. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a button. I'm just going to make this button a little bit bigger, and I'm just going to change the name of this button to btn add from code, and this button is going to add something into the list from code, and I'm going to just scroll down to the bottom of this, and then the text I'm just going to change that so it makes more sense. Add an item from code. Okay, so very, very simple. Now what we're going to do is take a look at how that would work, and it's quite simple. If we click on the button, we're going to add an event, and I'm just going to give it a meaningful name, so add from code. Put the event in there, and that will make us our new function, which is what we're going to put our bit of code in here. So to add something to it, if we just go back for a moment, you can see we've got my list box, but I left it a little bit of a poor name really. I called it listbox1, so I'm just going to put lst for list and items. So just give it a bit more of a meaningful name. Go back into my code, and as a shortcut, if you want to get back into your code quickly, you've got two ways. You can either right click and go view code, or the easy way is just to press F7. And then when we're in here, all we need to do is add a bit of code, and we're going to say list, I think we called it, didn't we? Yeah, list items. We've got the dot, and we're going to go items, and we're going to go dot add, and we can pass in a string to add to that, so I'm just going to call that item 1. And if we press the button now, so if we give that a run, you can see if I press the button now, our item 1 is added to the list. Okay, so here we've seen that we can add an item from code. So every time you wanted to add an item, you could just call that little bit of code again. If you wanted to add an item from, say, a text box or something, that would be fairly simple. Here we've hard coded a string to pass in, but let's just take a look at how we could get that maybe from a text box. So let's just go in here, let's make a bit of room, let's drop a text box in, so from down the bottom here, pop that in, make that a bit bigger so it matches. I'm going to give it a name again, so I'm just going to call that txt input, and that's going to hold my input here. And what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to modify that function, so I can just double click on the button here and it'll jump to the code. So instead of here adding it in by hard coding, what I'm just going to say is take my text input and get the text property from that and put that into my list. And if I run that through, we can see now if I put an item here, so let's put D in there, add the item, it appears in the list. E, it appears in the list. So it's very easy to get things into the list by using the code behind there. So I'm just going to stop that for a second. If I wanted to make it a little bit more robust here, one option I've got is to put an if statement around it, and that could check and validate the data. We'll take a look at that in a moment. So what we're going to do now is just make sure that before we put anything in the list box, we don't want to put an empty item in here. So I'm just going to just put a simple if statement saying if the text input dot text doesn't equal an empty string. I'm just going to keep it very simple for the minute. If it doesn't equal an empty string, then we can add that item into the list here. So if I just play that, we'll put a little bit of validation in to make it a little bit easier. So here if I try and add an item, you can see nothing's happening at the moment. Put something in the box and it's added to the list. So that's nice and straightforward. The other way that you can add items to a list is to pass it an array. And what we're going to do here is we're going to create an array and we're going to pass that straight into the list. So what I'm going to do is go back into my form and I'm going to add another button here. Just going to stretch that out. Again, I'm just going to go and give it some text. So add items from an array. So again, nice and straightforward. I'm just going to give my button a more meaningful name. So btn add from array. I'm just going to capitalise that there. And what we're going to do now to add it from the arrays, we're going to go into here, we're going to add an event again, click event, add from array, and that's going to create us our function that we're going to use. So the first thing we're going to need is an array. So I'm just going to make a string array, same sort of way of doing it as last year. So I'm going to say string, I'm going to put in my square brackets so it knows it's an array. I'm going to call that data, and I'm going to use that shorthand way of filling it in, and I'm going to just put some values. So I'm going to have D, I'm going to have E, E, and I'm going to have F in there as well. So I've got my 3 values there. So I've created my array, and to get that into the list, all I need to do is go lst for list items dot add. Now, sorry, just before I do that, we don't want to go add here, we want to go add range. You can see the add is expecting a single item, whereas my add range is expecting an array of items. So I'm just going to go add range, and I'm going to pass it data. So data is the name of the array. I've just passed it straight in there. So let's run that, bring that down, and you can see if I press that now, those items are added into my list. So it's fairly simple to get items in. Combo boxes work in exactly the same way. Obviously you just replace list items there with the combo box name. So the final thing to look at is, okay, we've got the items in, how do we get the items back out when the user has selected them? We'll take a look at that now. Okay, so let's take a look at how we actually get the items back out. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add another button here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just change a property of that button. I'm going to go down to that. I'm currently selected events here, so I must make sure I've got the properties so I can actually see the items here. So I'm going to go down and find the text that says button 1 and put in here get selected index. Now what that means is, obviously each item in the list has a position. So A is at position 0, just like an array, B is at 1, C is at 2. So sometimes I might want to be able to see what item the user has selected. So what we're going to do is add an event to that, go to click, and I'm just going to give that a name, so get selected index, and I'm just going to go behind the code again, and here I'm just going to find out what item was selected. So remember, it's LST because our list was called list items. I can just use the property selected index, and that's going to tell us which item has been selected. And to put this out to the screen, I'm just going to use a message box. So let's put a message box just above this, so MB for message box, bring that in, and I'm just going to cut that bit of code and pop that in there. If we have a look at this, it's giving us an integer. So the only thing I need to be able to do here is just run the dot to string, and that's going to tell me what item's been selected and convert it to a string. So let's just run that. It says I've got an error here, it says I've got a bracket expected. So let's just have a quick check through, make sure I haven't deleted the bracket along the way, which I appear that I have. So yeah, put that bracket back in, bring this back down. If I choose B, press my button, you can see it's telling me that item 1 has been selected. If I choose the first item, it's telling me index 0. If I add my array items, you can see that will find the item from that list. So it's very easy to find the number that this corresponds to. The other thing that you might want to do is actually get out the text that's in there. So that's fairly easy. Do these things the same way. We'll put another button in, and this time I'm going to say get selected item. So let's just go change this back to the properties view. I'm just going to scroll down to the text and say get selected item, and I'm going to go and put an event on that. Click event, get selected item, so trying to give it a meaningful name again. And here I'm just going to do the same thing as before, go into my list box, oops, moved where I am, so into the list box, list items. Now here you can see we've had selected index before, we've got selected item, and all I'm going to do is make that into a string. And again, I can use my message box here to help me out, so I'm just going to use MB for short, press my tab key twice, and I'm just going to copy that bit of code inside there. So now when I press that button, it's hopefully going to show me what item's been chosen, so let's run that. Bring this back down into view for you. Press B and press that button, and you can see there it's showing that B has been selected. So using lists and combo boxes is fairly easy, and hopefully that's given you a good idea of what you might want to do. Other things that you might want to research is using events, so when the user actually changes the item, maybe you want to display or update something else, and we'll look at that when we look at events a little bit later on.